Good afternoon. I'm Michael Sanders, and we're in the auditorium of Canterbury Woods in Pacific Grove, where there are storms from 3 different fires, smoke in the air, ash in the air. Hope you all are safe and well. This week, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the vote in the Tennessee legislature that finally enacted the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. And that gave the right that women and some men had been searching for many decades, the right to vote. So to celebrate that, to commemorate that, I'd like to play some music by 2 remarkable women who were in music. Clara Schumann in the 19th century and Dorothy Fields in the 20th century. We'll begin with Dorothy Fields. She was born in 1904 to really musical comedy royalty. Her mother was a singer. 2 of her brothers were writers and producers. And her father was known as the king of musical comedy. He was half of the duo that was Weber and Field, the most successful comedy team at the end of the 19th century. They had their own theater on Broadway. When that broke up in the same year that Dorothy was born, the senior Fields went into producing. And over the course of the next dozen years, he produced more than 40 musicals. His daughter began in showbiz as half of a girls' comedy duo that was called Silly and Dottie. Probably just as well that they got out of that business and that Dorothy went into writing, which she especially enjoyed. So I'm going to begin with some of the early songs that she wrote with Jimmy McHugh. And the first one is a favorite song that Judy Garland often used to begin programs. This is I Feel a Song Coming On. Thank you. Now, another song that Dorothy wrote early on in 1930 that is the song On the Sunny Side of the Street. We heard Jack Stanley play that just the day before yesterday. I think it's a good song to play in these times of not so sunny times. So the words that were meaningful to people during the beginning of the Depression and are meaningful to us today are, grab your coat and get your hat. Leave your worries on the doorstep. Just point your feet, direct your feet to the sunny side of the street, on the sunny side of the street. Thank you. And now we're going to go back 100 years to Clara Schumann, one of the, I would say, one of the top 2 or 3 composers of the pianists of the 19th century. The only people who could compete with her were Franz Liszt and perhaps Anton Rubinstein. She had an enormous long career, 61 years in front of the public. She was admired and consulted by people. The whole school of composers and musicians turned to her for advice and acceptance. She was a composer. She wrote lots of piano music, of course. She wrote piano concerto, some chamber music. She wrote some choral pieces. She wrote a number of songs. She was respected as a musician at a time when women didn't always get that respect. Her husband turned to her as an equal for advice. So did Brahms. She played many of the premieres of many different composers, but especially of her husband Robert and of Johannes Brahms. Anyway, my plan today is to play 4 pieces that she composed in 1845 that are under the general title of 4 fugitive pieces, Flüchtige Stücke. 4 fugitive pieces. And the first of those is in F major. Thank you. Now I'd like to play two love songs that Dorothy wrote with Jimmy McHugh. Jimmy hired her to write words for a show that he was doing called The Blackbirds of 1928. This is perhaps a somewhat shameful part of American musical history. There was a time when we had only had shows that consisted only of black performers, black orchestras. They were written by white people, they were directed by white people, they were produced by white people. Most of the profits went to white people. Not the happiest time, perhaps, but it also gave opportunities for some very talented players who might not otherwise have had a place to perform. And in fact, the song I'm going to play now jump-started the fledgling career of Adelaide Hall and Bill Bojangles Robinson. It was written for one of the Cotton Club reviews. These were things that Duke Ellington frequently later recorded. So this is I Can't Give You Anything But Love. Thank you. And the other song, which, as it happens, Jack Stanley also has played recently, was a song that, though it wasn't introduced by her, became her great theme song, Frances Langford's song. Bob Hope writes in his memoirs how during the Second World War, he and Frances Langford traveled from military bases playing concerts for the military. And that when she sang this particular song, it almost always brought down the house. I think we can understand why. These are the words. You could imagine what they might have meant to young people far away from home and in a frightening situation. The words are, "Why stop to think of whether this little dream might fade? We've put our heads together, now we are one, I'm not afraid. If there's a cloud above, if it should rain, we'll let it, but for tonight, forget it. I'm in the mood for love." Thank you. Now we'll go back to Schumann, talk a little bit more about her life. She began her public career at 9. She went on her first international tours at 11. But at 9, she met another young pianist, a young pianist who was twice her age, 18. This was Robert Schumann. He was so impressed by this young woman, Clara Wieck, that he wrote to his mother and said, "I'm leaving law. I want to be a pianist, and I want to study with the father of this wonderful pianist I've just heard." So in fact, he did. He moved into the house of the Clara Wiecks. The father told him that he would become the greatest pianist in Europe. But something went dreadfully wrong. Somehow he permanently injured his right hand. Nobody knows quite how. One theory is that he had used some kind of mechanical device to strengthen his hand. Another theory is that he had some kind of surgery that went wrong. In any case, now he was a pianist who could not play his own music, composer. So he decided, however, to go on in music as a composer. And at the age of 12, Clara became his sole performer, person who premiered all of his works. So now I'll go back and play another of the fugitive pieces. This is the second one, and it's in A minor. Thank you. Now, we've been spending some time with Dorothy Fields as a lyricist, as a writer of words for songs, without actually talking very much about the words that she wrote. So I thought it would be of some interest to say something about her work as a lyricist. She was asked once, well, in these songs that you come up with, what comes first? Is it the tune? Is it the words? And she answered, it's the title. And by that she seemed to mean that it's the situation, the character of the person that is singing, what is in a story that has led him to say the things, or that she is led to say, whom she's singing to, all of these things. And that from that comes the music, and from that come the words. She used to spend as much as 8 weeks researching, discussing, and making notes for the projects that she was working on. I thought we might take a song not very well known and try to imagine some of the way that she might have gone about writing it. This is a song that she wrote with another woman in popular music, Kay Swift. I don't know anything about how she actually wrote this particular song, but if she proceeded in the usual way, Kay Swift would have written the tune, handed it to her, and then she would have found the words. So you can imagine that Swift gives you this tune. I'll play you the first 8 bars. Well, I think what you can hear is that this tune is made up of half a dozen little motives, little fragments of different lengths. One is 2 bars, one is 1 bar, 2 of them are 1.5 bars. It's as if Swift said, okay, Dottie, let's see what you can do with that tune. So just to imagine the process, she might have started with the last 4 notes, which make their own motive. So the words she came up with for those 4 notes are, can't we be friends? Can't we be friends? And so going back a little bit, something to rhyme with, can't we be friends? How about, this is how the story ends. So that could be this. This is how the story ends. Okay? Now to connect those two, we've got this tune, which she decided to make. He's going to turn me down and say, can't we be friends? So that makes most of the first 8 bars. Going back a little bit further, there's this 3-note motive, just 3 notes, which is not very friendly for a person who's trying to write poetry that rhymes. But here we are. Now it seems. Dorothy planned to rhyme that with the previous phrase and do that with 3 different sets of words. So this is what she wrote. First time around, I thought I'd found the man of my dreams. Now it seems. Second time around, she wrote, I thought for once it couldn't go wrong. Not for long. And then the last time when that tune comes back, she says, I thought I'd found a man I could trust. What a bust. So that made up the most of the song. And then in the middle, she had a bunch of short phrases, which, without spending the time, she set this way. Never again, through with love, through with men. They play their game without shame, and who's to blame? So now I'll play the whole tune without the words, of course. I wouldn't subject you to me singing the words, but we can imagine this great tune by Kay Smith with ingenious words by Dorothy Fields. Now let's go back to Clara Schumann. It's no surprise that two young, gifted musical people living in the same household fell in love with each other. When Robert was 27, when Clara was 18, he asked her if she would marry. She said yes. They went to the father, and he said absolutely no. In telling this story, he's always the villain, and in truth, he was a truly terrible man, and his behavior was despicable in this case. But you can understand why he might have reservations. Here was this young daughter, still a teenager, protected, sheltered, probably had never had another boyfriend. Here was this man who was supposed to be a pianist who couldn't play the piano anymore, supposed to be a composer but wasn't popular. The music that he wrote was hard for people to understand. He also seemed to be just a little bit over the top. There were hints even then that he seemed to be a little manic and depressive. Well, the whole story is ugly, and eventually Clara and Robert sued the father because at that time in Vienna, it was a young woman could not marry without her father's consent. And the court granted, kind of exceptionally, the right to get married. So they did. They got married the day before Clara was 21. They went on for a very happy marriage. The other part of the story really belongs somewhere else, of Robert's gradually increasing insanity. He died young. The last 2 years of his life, he was in an institution, and his wife was forbidden to visit him. Clara went on for as long as she'd been married, an equal length of time. She was the sole breadwinner for a large family. We won't talk about that, but instead I'll play the third of the fugitive pieces, I think the most beautiful and most deeply felt. This one is in D major. Thank you. Now, two songs, love songs, that she wrote with Jerome Kern. Both of them came from Swing Time, a successful movie of 1936. There's a story about the first of the songs. 35 years after Dorothy Field had died, in the year 2009, President Barack Obama, in his inaugural speech, echoed lyrics of Field's when he said, "Starting today, we must pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and begin again the work of remaking America." He was referring, of course, to Field's song, "Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, start all over again." And the other song, one that Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire made successful, was "A Fine Romance." And thank you. Now the last of the Clara Schumann pieces. She had an enormous influence. She was a strong-willed woman. After Robert's illness and death, she cared for 8 kids, a household. She provided for them all. But as her career progressed, she wrote less and less, and after Robert died, she never wrote anything else. There's a kind of poignant passage in the diary that she and Robert kept together. She wrote, "A woman must not desire to compose. There has never yet been one able to do it. Should I expect to be the one?" In fact, after her death, her music was entirely forgotten. In the last couple decades, people have begun to play it, explore it some more. And so these fugitive pieces, which perhaps are the very best of her piano pieces, are not quite fugitive. They haven't entirely disappeared. Here's the last of the 4 fugitive pieces. It's in C major, in G major. She wrote it for a Christmas present for Robert. So here is the last of the 4 fugitive pieces of Clara Schumann. And finally, one last song of Dorothy Fields. In the 60s, popular music changed a great deal, and suddenly musical comedy tunes were not so successful. So Dorothy kept writing musical comedies, and in fact, one of hers, Redhead, won 6 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. But it wasn't much of a musical. Nobody plays any of the songs. And her career was fading quietly when a young man, Cy Coleman, writing in a different style, asked her to write the words to the musical that was coming. You can imagine, she was a good 25 years older than all the other writers and producers, there's a picture of her with her silvery hair, immaculately coiffed, a pearl necklace, a beautiful tailored suit. Anyway, he brought her a tune, and these are the words that she wrote for it. The minute you walked in the joint, I could see you were a man of distinction, a real big spender. Good looking, so refined. Say, wouldn't you like to know what's going on in my mind? So, a little bit different kind of musical. But on the other hand, pure Dorothy Fields. Immediately, you know the character of the person singing. Immediately, you have some sense of what the situation is. In this song, you have a very clear sense of whom she's singing to. And I think also, no matter how disreputable the character might be, you sort of like the person who's singing. So here is, we'll finish with her song, Big Spender, from Sweet Charity. Thank you very much. Thank you to our technical team, Keith and Jovan and Wuhit. And thank you all for joining me and spend a little time with me. I'll end as I usually do with Good Night, Sweetheart. Good Night, Sweetheart by Noble and Campbell.